Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rob and I like to focus on woodworking, resin, and laser engraving. A few weeks ago, one of my clients reached out to me and asked me to make them a special serving board for Canada Day. After kicking around a few ideas, they fell in love with this one. A biscuit serving board with a red resin maple leaf in it. Now, these people are great. They buy off me all the time. I've made countless things for them. And so I wanted to do something special for them. So I threw in a set of coasters, slate coasters, engraved with the same pattern of the maple leaf. So in this video today, I'm going to show you how to create this serving board with the resin maple leaf in it and how to engrave these coasters. So stick around because this build starts right now. So the first thing I did was I went onto a search engine and just did a search for a maple leaf. And when I found the one I liked, I printed it off and taped it to the board and drew it out so that this way I had a perfect drawing in dead center on my board. There you go. What do you think? Next, I take the board into my shop, drill a bunch of holes so that it's easier for me to use the jigsaw and get around the middle of the board. Once the center of the board is cut out, I then start to take it a little slower and do more of the fine cutting. And right here, boom, oops, I cracked the board. But not to worry, I'm going to show you how to fix something like that so you can't even see it. When you're doing this fine cutting, you really want to take your time. You want to do a nice clean cut. The cleaner your cut now, the less you have to clean it up by using a file or sandpaper later. So take your time. And there it is. What do you think? I think it came out actually pretty good, and it's going to save me a lot of time in the filing and sanding time. Next, I'm going to take the tuck tape and put it underneath where the crack is. And with my utility knife, I'm going to cut out the actual leaf so it's nice and clean around the bottom, so that this way when I take another piece of tuck tape and force it into the corners using the back of my utility blades, I know I'm not going to get a leak. And there it is. Perfect every time. Now I'm ready to start mixing just a little bit of resin to start filling that crack, and I'm also going to fill a few of the voids that are in the wood. And the reason why it's so important to fill the cracks and the little voids is if you're going to put food on this serving board, then you have to be careful that food doesn't get into any of these cracks or the voids and then possibly cause a contamination. One thing to know about filling a crack with resin is that once you put resin in it, the resin will continue to go down the board. And so you keep having to add a little bit of resin over and over again until it stops sucking that resin down into the bottom. At this point, I'm going to wait 48 hours for the resin to cure, and then after that 48 hours, I'm going to take a file and sandpaper and make sure that all my cuts are nice and sharp. Next, I'm going to flip the board over and apply tuck tape to the bottom so that when I pour the resin, it doesn't leak out everywhere. Now take one word of advice. Make sure you actually clamp your piece down to a solid board so that this way it remains nice and flat. And remember to level your board so that the resin doesn't tilt to one side. Next, I'm going to put a bead of silicone around my leaf so that this way when I pour my resin in and I overfill it, it doesn't run all over the table. And the silicone I use for it is this DAP Alex Plus, and I usually pick it up for about $1.99 at Lowe's. Next, I'm going to mix my resin, just the base, and add then my color. Now, I'm not showing this to you, but I'm literally mixing this for 5 minutes. You've got to make sure that resin and the pigments are mixed together thoroughly, or else you're going to get a real bad pour, which is going to leave the resin either sticky or it's going to be flexible. As you can see in this video, I didn't mix enough the first time, so I actually went ahead and mixed a little more and just added it to the top. After 48 hours, I'll come back down into my shop and remove all the clamps. And if you look really closely, you can see that the actual resin where the leaf is has actually shrunken down a little bit. That's why I always over pour my resin, because I know that it's going to sink down a little bit. And if you do just pour it level, you're going to have to do one of two things. One, mix a little bit of clear resin to pour on top, or two, you're going to have to sand down the whole board evenly to ensure that then when you rub your hand over the resin and the wood part, you don't feel a dip in the wood or resin. Now as for sanding, what I do is I start with my 60 grit and I get the board nice and flat. Once I'm done with the 60, I move to the 80 120, 150, 180, 240, 300, 400, 500, and 600. And in between all that, I'm going to continuously wet down the board to ensure that I'm popping the grain every time, so that this way that board is as smooth as can be. Now that the board is all sanded, I'm going to go ahead and start polishing my resin. And first I'm going to use a rubbing compound from turtle wax, and it does a great job of removing the heavier lines that are left behind from the sandpaper. And I'll take a good amount of time here. I know you'll only see it for a few seconds here, but I actually spend a good 5 minutes on that. And I'll add a little extra water and keep it going. Now I'm going to move to a polishing compound. And of course this is again another turtle wax product, and this will remove all the hairlines and everything and buff that resin to a nice shine. Trust me, spend your time on this, because the more time you spend on it, the better it's going to look. Then give the board a good wipe down and admire your hard work. What do you think of that? Doesn't it look great? Nice and shiny? Alright, now the finishing. I'm going to finish the top of the actual board. And what I do is I take a food safe oil and I rub it all over the board and just give it time for it to soak in.
15 minutes later.
Now that the board has had some time to absorb all those oils, I'm going to go ahead and rub it down. The more you rub it, the shinier it's going to look. Time for the coasters. First thing I do is I protect them with a clear Rust-Oleum satin finish and wait until they dry. Once the coasters are dry, I'll put them on the laser engraver and engrave away. As for the settings of the laser engraver, as you can see right here, I used 4,000 millimeters per minute at 80% power. So there you go, what do you think? My customer ordered just the charcuterie board with a nice red maple leaf on it, and I decided to go ahead and make her these 6 coasters with that same pattern of the maple leaf in them right there. If you've liked this video, I really would appreciate a like and subscribe. Until the next video, we'll see you around.